And let me start here then with our slides right here. Wait, hold a second. Where is it? Here. Okay. So we are entering our 11th week, and that means we have 3 more weeks to go. And actually, I want to work on that with you guys in a second to plan what is ahead. So let me first do a little bit of announcements and housekeeping. You should be getting your comments on your essay 2 this week. My plan is to finish this up this week in reading them and sending you comments, reactions, grades, and the like. And also regarding quizzes, what I have in mind is the following. I want to drop your worst quiz of 4 quizzes. We have done 2, and I want to do 2 more. What I mean is for grades. And then from there, again, I will erase the worst quiz from each one of you. So I need to decide on when is a good week to run these 2 quizzes, because we have been covering new material from last week and the week before that I didn't cover in the past quiz, and I want to make sure that we have the minimum comprehension of some of the topics. For example, on the last models we did on bargaining, for example, in the Brownsville model, the bargaining between the city and the workers because of the environmental standards and the wages. We did that last week. So I want to do that soon. And then a 4th quiz from what we are going to be doing this week and next week. I don't know if you prefer earlier, let's say, for example, this coming Thursday or 1 week from today, maybe one of those, and then one more at the end, probably, because we're not going to have a final exam. You're just going to write a term paper. So I was thinking that maybe this coming Thursday or next week. So I want to hear in the chat your opinions on what would you prefer. So go ahead and type that if you would prefer the 3rd quiz this coming Thursday or next week, let's say Tuesday. So go ahead and type your preferences on that. And for the 4th week, if I go back here while you type some of those, let me save something here. Hold a second. And I want to show you what the plan is that you have in the Moodle. So let me open up that here. Moodle, here it is. And on the weekly plan here. So let's see what I have here. So thank you for that you're writing in the chat, and I will use that to see what your preferences are. So here's the weekly plan that you have been seeing in Moodle, and which we have been pretty much covering right on time every week. So we have these 4 weeks to come, and in those weeks, my plan is to apply a lot of what we have been doing to major issues like climate change, biodiversity loss, issues of the oceans depletion, issues of pandemics. So in these 3 weeks, and the idea is that maybe we can do that last week, that last quiz, maybe on that week of the 4th of May at some point. And the idea of that quiz is that I want to evaluate your capacity to apply many of these models to these different major issues. So if I am reading correctly, Joseph is asking if we have class next Tuesday. You're right. That's one of those days that Wednesday class is on Tuesday. So that means we would not have class on that Tuesday, because as it says here, that Wednesday, that Tuesday is a Wednesday class for you, right? That should be correct according to what they told me at the beginning of the semester. So that means that we would have only Thursday next week. So in that sense, we could do the quiz either that Thursday or this coming Thursday. So that would mean, if I read here, for those of you who were thinking next Tuesday, no, you're right. And thanks, Joseph, for reminding that. So it would have to be for for Thursday. Crystal have 2 papers due this week. So let's do it next week. It seems like many of you would be okay with doing it 1 week from this coming Thursday. Okay. So I will send an announcement, and I will mention in the announcement what that quiz will be about. Okay. So let's do it 1 week from this coming Tuesday. So that's regarding quizzes. Also, I will be sending you some more information on your progress and performance. So once I get the grades from the SA2 and I send you the grades from the other quizzes and participation in the Zoom polls and the like, I will send all that information so that you get an idea of how your indicators are doing so far. Let's talk about then what is the plan for this week and what is coming up. So if there are any questions regarding this issue of the quizzes, let me go to the issue of the plan for this week. So what we're going to be doing today is trying to wrap up this section 4 on some issues of dynamics and sustainability. That's why you read this short piece, those 5 pages by Amartya Sen, one of the greatest thinkers of modern times and in economics and philosophy, who wrote that nice compact piece on the issue of sustainability and the rights between present and future generations. And I'm going to talk a little bit too about the other reading that you did for today by Schill and co-authors on the rational model that we should be embracing for thinking about the Anthropocene and for a sustainable future. And I'm going to be asking you a few questions about those readings and see how we can put together a narrative of what is the conclusion of going through all these economic tools that we have been covering in the course and how they relate to this particular and probably most urgent and relevant matter, meaning sustaining the capacity of Earth to provide good quality of life for people today and future generations. And that is a great way of wrapping up that section 4 and then enter into section 5 that, as I said, what I want you is to think about the great challenges at the planetary level at this point. Again, as I said, some examples are the loss of biodiversity, climate change, supplying food for humankind, the issues of inequality. These are all related to our course. And the idea in terms of approaching this last section of the course in those 3 remaining weeks, which would be 5 classes because of this Wednesday day, is that I want to work with you guys on exploring issues, which, by the way, you have been exploring in your research papers. Then try to use the tools that we have been using to apply them to these major issues. And also to have a discussion about policies, how to tackle these problems. And and what could you apply from the course to be able to have a better foundation in you to argue in favor or against some of these issues. And what I am going to prepare in those 5 remaining classes, in those 3 weeks, is that I will provide an overview of the problem, sort of like the major indicators or symptoms of the problem. And then you are going to be working during class in small groups in trying to use the tools from the course and applying them to these issues. And we will do this in subgroups, and I will travel around the subgroups during class, trying to help you apply them. And then I will ask you to present them to the rest of the class. And also, part of that presentation and debate is going to be applied or presented in class with the idea of you reacting to motions, to proposals, to propositions to solve these challenges, okay? So one that I have used often in my classes is to tell people how much should vegetarianism and veganism is going to help reduce fossil carbon emissions in general. So this has been posed as a great solution. Well, how good it is. What does science say about eliminating the consumption of meat from humans, how much that can contribute to carbon emissions and climate change? So we can use our tools, the economic tools that we have, and we can address this question and see if we can be more specific and more concrete in trying to respond to that question. Another interesting one, which by the way, some of you are working on, is electric cars. How would electric cars help save the planet? Is it really true? What is at stake? Whose jobs are at stake? What consequences are in place because of changing from fossil fuel-based cars into battery electric-based cars? And how is the shift in energy technology and the like? That's another major discussion. In terms of food systems, another interesting major problem, which is fascinating, is that science more and less seems to agree that today we have enough food to feed all humans on Earth today. Pretty much today, as we speak. And yet, several millions of people are going to bed tonight, or are at this point, or went to bed at this point tonight, starving. So what's going on there? What's going on with the food system and how sustainable it is in terms of providing a response to the needs of people? And yet, it seems like we are capable of producing that food, but on the other hand, there is lots of food waste, very unequal and unfair system of food distribution and food production. And that's one more of those big, interesting controversies. And one final one that I like a lot, of which I'm going to talk later in those problems, is the proposal by precisely a faculty from the economics department at UMass. His name is Jim Boyce, and he retired from the department, but he's quite actively right now. And he wrote a book, and he has been offering in different venues this idea in this book, which is called carbon dividends. And here, Jim Boyce makes the following proposition. The idea is to charge every single one emitter of carbon into the atmosphere with a carbon tax. But there's an extra layer, an extra step. Everything that is received, all the revenues from those carbon taxes are allocated to every single human on Earth. So the idea is to apply a carbon tax, but also combine it with a kind of universal basic income. With the idea, with the argument that if all humans share the same atmosphere, they are in a way shareholders of the atmosphere. And if they are shareholders of the atmosphere, and the atmosphere doesn't belong to a particular country or to a particular person or a particular group, in fact, it would be impossible to assign private property rights to the atmosphere, because the atmosphere is this mass of stuff circulating around the biosphere, and the atmosphere is moving around. So it's not like the US has its own piece of atmosphere. So you charge everyone a carbon tax, and the more you emit, the more you pay. The less you emit, the less you pay. Then you collect all that money, and then you send a check to everyone. And that's a very interesting but controversial idea. Just in the same way that some Republicans in the US today are contesting and debating that these checks that are being distributed by the Biden-Harris administration, which, by the way, I just learned that they call them the bills and the cash. The bills for Biden and the cash for Kamala, cash with a K. Somebody told me that they're calling these checks. So some people are being critical or skeptic that this is not good for the economy, because these payments are going to make some people lazy, or these are going to make people not seek a job, and they're just going to live out of those checks. So the idea of distributing a basic income to humans, it's quite controversial in economics. But on the other hand, some people are really suffering through the pandemic. Some people are really, really having trouble paying their rent and buying their groceries and their utility and their bills. And this is giving them a hand in moments of dire difficulties that they went through in this year of the pandemic. So that's one controversial idea that could be explored and debated and discussed. So those are examples of things that I will start in class by making an overall presentation, and then ask you to sit in smaller groups and decide on how to tackle that problem and how to use the different tools that we have from the course and apply them, and then get back to plenary to the whole group together and discuss how you apply these tools to that particular problem. So that will be the rest of the course until we get to the end. And then at the end, we are going to have your final papers, your term papers presented to me in writing, and then I will provide feedback to those individual term papers. So I wanted to give you a heads up on what is coming, because we are wrapping up today the last section of the course, and then next week on Thursday, we're going to start with that idea. And by the way, nice coincidence, it's a great day, April 22nd, so that should work in that sense, which should lead me to, where is it? Ah, no, wait, no, the poll, no, I have the poll for later. So let me stop there and see if there are questions. Any of you have questions of what is coming up in the course, or how we're going to proceed next? No? Okay. Okay. And anyway, I will send an announcement reminding you of the quizzes, dates, and the like. So let's get into the problem of sustainability and dynamics. And by dynamics and sustainability, I mean the following. You probably have noticed that throughout the class, in the different cases, examples, situations, games that we have presented, there is kind of a static notion of the problems. It is happening today and in this particular place, right? So if we go to the Brownsville model of the company that is the only employer in town and the citizens of the town, and they need to bargain over wages or quality of the environment, that is happening at this very moment in the analysis, and it's contained in a particular spatial issue and space in a particular area, and is surrounding a particular group of people, okay? The interests of the business and the interests of the citizens, some of which are workers. If we go back and you remember when reading the problem of Angela and Bruno in one of the chapters, and Angela has some land and she works on the land, and then Bruno comes, and at the beginning he forces her to give all the proceeds to him, and then they begin to bargain over the proceeds of what happens in that land. That is happening at that very moment between those two. If you remember the Dasgupta game of this guy who has this asset and this other guy who has the skills to make that asset work and put the X product into the market and then sell it for $8, and then they need to decide how to distribute the profits from that business. Again, that is happening in a static way. It's like one shot in that moment with those two people analysis. Keep going back, and we have been doing this on and on and on and on. In the ultimatum game, in the dictator game, in the trust game, in the public goods game, and even all the way back to the first day of class in the car markets. If you remember, we repeated this every round, but if you remember well, every round was like a start over of the planet. So there was no accumulation of problems. You just decided in that round whether as a seller or as a buyer to trade a number of cars. And then in that very round, you suffered the consequences of that trade because that produced emissions, and then that decreased your net earnings because you had to pay out of your earnings your costs, your environmental damages, and the attention to those damages. But getting to a sustainable planet and a sustainable economy involves dealing with the dynamics, and the dynamics are very complicated, and the modeling of the dynamics gets also very complicated. But I'm going to try to simplify some of these things today for you with a few examples and a few situations, and also using as well the data from the last experiment that we did at the end of last class, in which I asked you whether you wanted to use one of these cash cards that you got paid those $100 for your work, and which a particular store you would like the card to be, and then whether you would be willing to trade waiting for a higher value card 1 year from now. And you will see the data from your responses. That has to do with sustainability and dynamics in the sense of dealing with short-term and long-term interests when we are talking about the environment. And this particular example from chapter 20, I think is good for noticing also that these dynamics happen also at an ecological level. So this particular example that is presented in this figure in chapter 20 is an interesting one, and it relates to some of you who are interested in the issues of deforestation and the Amazon and the like, and I think it's a good example. And the point is the following. We have been analyzing, and some of you precisely in your papers who are addressing this problem are pretty much thinking about the particular consequences of how, if you transform land from forest into farming, right? And how farming reduces forest area, the consequences of that. And you can use all these different models that we have been presenting in class to address that problem. The problem of external costs to other because of the deforestation, who suffers from that, who gains from that, etc. Some of those consequences at a larger scale are related to rainfall. This has been quite well documented. This is the idea that I mentioned a while ago at the beginning of the class on this notion of the horizontal rivers, the horizontal rain, these particular currents of air that travel from winds that come from the Atlantic Ocean, they cross the Amazon, and they collect humidity, they collect water through the Amazon, and then pour back that water later in the Andes or in the South Cone in South America. And this works at a much larger scale, from winds, these air currents from the Atlantic Ocean all the way through the Amazon, which comprises 5 countries, and then collecting that water and then sending back that water through rainfall that is critical to the survival of millions of people in cities in the Andes, in Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia. And this is part of this interdependence, right? But notice, this creates some feedbacks that are quite fascinating and complex. So one of those feedbacks is that if you reduce rainfall, you increase the conditions for fires, the likelihood of fires, right? And with more fires, you reduce more forest. So more forest gets cleared. And therefore, you reinforce the problem of deforestation, reducing rainfall. So think that in this upper box, this is handmade. This is made by humans. But once you alter the natural equilibrium and the natural cycles, you mess up this. Fires have been natural in the history of Earth for millions of years. But Earth has found a way to balance out an equilibrium in terms of fires, regrowth of vegetation, and content of water in vegetation, and how water flows in the water cycle. But if you, through deforestation and farming, alter that, you are going to trigger this vicious cycle that can be quite harmful for humans. The California fires or the fires in the Amazon, to bring one more example, those we are just beginning to understand what are those cycles. It's not that the fires are new to Australia or are new to California. They have been there. But the question is if there are too many now to maintain an equilibrium. And this has to do with the dynamics of nature and the dynamics of interaction between humans and nature. And that is one of the main issues that we need to keep in mind, that in many of the problems that we are dealing with right now, there's going to be dynamics. Let me give you more examples. Let's suppose that we get rid of gas-based cars, right? So we think that engines based on gasoline or natural gas or diesel fuel are going to disappear. And we are going to shift towards electric cars based on batteries. Those batteries need to be manufactured using lithium. And now we're beginning to see an increasing demand for lithium around the world. And then you will see a demand for lithium mining in key countries that have a nice, good endowment of this mineral to produce lithium, to produce batteries. And then we are going to enter into another dynamic cycle of exploitation in some countries. And for that purposes, just look it up later if you want, and go and see what is happening in Congo, in Africa, as a country that seems to be highly endowed with lithium at this point. Try to imagine the dynamics. Try to imagine a diagram like this that will have to do with mining for other materials. One last minor example that is quite relevant for the transition towards renewable energy, solar and photovoltaic. It happens that copper, the metal copper, it's quite good at transmitting energy through cables. That's why so many cables are made of copper. Now the demand for mining for copper is increasing in the world, and the prices for copper are beginning to show some interesting dynamics that is going to be complex for the countries that are endowed with copper. So you can imagine that, yes, it is nice that we shift towards renewable energies, but at the same time, we're going to shift the demand for certain products, certain materials, certain commodities that are going to be critical for the provision of renewable energy. So that's one example of how this is so complex, and this complexity, which is what I'm going to try to address between today and Thursday in terms of wrapping up the problems of sustainability from an economic lens, but also bringing in some complexity because of these dynamics and these particular feedbacks. So that's that story. And the other story is the problem of discounting the future. Okay. So for discounting the future, we have sorry, wait. Yes, for discounting the future, we have the experiment that we did last time in our class, at the end of the class, that I'm going to show you the data for those of you who participated in that experiment. And that experiment was, and I am reminding here the others who were not present, the idea was that I ask you to choose from a number of stores, which store would you like to be paid with a cash card that that you could use either right away or next week, starting next week, or 1 year and 1 week from now. And I asked first which store of the different options you would be interested in getting the card from. That was just out of curiosity. And if I give you, and actually let me give you first the options, because that was interesting for me. If you remember the possibilities, I'm going to tell you what the possibilities were, and I want you to guess in the chat which do you think was the most favored stores. So the question read like the following. Let me share the screen here, and this is how the poll showed last week. Here, if you were to be paid for a job with $100 cash card from these vendors, which one would you prefer? And those were the options right there. Best Buy, Hollister, Gap, Foot Locker, H&M, Starbucks, and Target. So I want to ask you, in the chat, which one do you think was the top vendor that you guys chose? And there were 13 options, 13 answers from those of you who participated. So go ahead and put in the chat, what do you think was the most preferred? Interesting. Everybody's saying Target. Everybody's saying Target. Alvin says wow, but I don't see wow in the stores. So Alvin, you're just surprised by the answers? So Yes, indeed. Target was the first place. Now, can you try to guess the second place from that list? Second place. What do you think was second place? Crystal says Best Buy, Best Buy, Best Buy, Starbucks. Wow, $100 in a Starbucks, that would be nice. That's coffee for. Second place, Best Buy, Best Buy. I see a lot of Best Buy. So let me pull up here because it was interesting. And see if I can show you your answers, but I'm going to hide the names. Here it is. And these are your answers. Basically, Target first place by far, and second place and only second option, Foot Locker. Interesting, right? And nobody else chose any of the other possibilities. Nobody chose Best Buy or Starbucks or anything else. Okay, now that's curiosity. Now let me get back to the interesting part, which is discounting. So here it is. And basically, what you can see, it is how clear and how consistent this is with the problem of impatience of humans. So if I ask you whether you get $100 now, $105 in 1 year, pretty much everyone except two of you who wanted to save that money, maybe because you are not urgently needing it, and you say, it's nice, get $5 in 1 year. And 84% of you prefer that card today, right now. The reason we do this next week is because when we do these experiments, and by the way, if you're interested, we do this sometimes with real cash. So we give these actual cards to people, and if they prefer to wait, then we issue the card so that they can charge it only 1 year from now. And the results are pretty similar, by the way. But if I say instead of $105, I say, okay, it's going to be 110. Now 4 of you would like to wait. And if I say 120, 7 of you would be interested in waiting. And if I say 130, 8 of you would like to wait. Now, somebody asked last Thursday, and that was interesting, but notice this just reinforces the point. Somebody was asking about inflation. Right now, inflation in the US is somewhere around 1.5 points, 1.5%, meaning that discounting for inflation or correcting for inflation, notice those $100 that you receive today would be worth $101 in 1 year, right? Let's say 102. So still 105 would be better, right? So it's not inflation. And yet you value the present more than the future. But also, and this is the key point about sustainability that I want to enter into the picture here, both things happen. We humans are impatient, but also, depending on the costs and benefits, we are capable to do some trade-offs between now and the future. In this particular case, it's all about benefits to you, private benefits to you. But what I'm trying to say is impatience makes you still prefer the $100 today, although if you put those $100 today in a savings account or in an investment that gives you at least inflation rates, you still would be worse off than those $105. And yet most people, 11 out of 13 people, preferred the money now because we are impatient. Now, There are many reasons for that. You need the $100 because you need to pay your bills next week. Or you want to go visit a friend, your partner, your family, and with those $100, you can cover a lot of those travel costs. You want to buy something that you have been wanting to have, and it's out of your budget and you really want it. You need to buy some medicine, some medications for you or a relative who is not covered by insurance. So many reasons to want that money now, that the benefits of that money now will be worth waiting 1 year for $5 more from that money. And it makes a lot of sense, right? But also, again, notice that as I go from 5 to 10 to 20 to 30, now you're willing to sacrifice your impatience against your possibility of enjoying $130 in 1 year from now, which doesn't mean that everybody switch. Look at the numbers here. Still, 5 people said, I still prefer the $100 now. And again, as I said, those are good reasons for not waiting for the $130 in 1 year, because of necessity, because of immediacy of needs that you need to resolve at this point, okay? And that leaves me in a good position to put on the table one of the major challenges to solve the dynamic problem of sustainability in terms of solving what is needed to be done today and what is going to happen to future generations in the future. Given that we are traveling in space in this spaceship Earth that we started the course with, if you remember the metaphor by Kenneth Boulding, that we are all contained, the 7.5 billion people in this planet Earth spaceship, traveling in space and pretty much closed as a system, putting up with the consequences of what we consume and what we produce, and trying to exist in a dignified manner, but also knowing that within that spaceship, more people are being born, some people are dying, and those people who are being born have a certain particular set of rights to get their needs satisfied by whatever that is limited in the economy and in this ecosystem called planet Earth, so that they can solve their needs. And that's exactly the question about sustainability and fairness. And for that, you read this particular piece of Amartya Sen, which again, whoops. So what happened? Stopped sharing. What happened here? Wait. I should be here. Stop share. And something happened here. Wait. Cerrar. My file. Yes, here. Okay. So let me quickly do a quick poll on 3 questions regarding that reading by Amartya Sen on sustainability. So go ahead and answer those.